Welcome in! आज की इस तज्ज़िये में. In today's analysis, we are diving right into a seriously dramatic and deeply rooted historical sermon from the Dawati Islami channel. We're going to break down a narrative that explores one of the most emotionally charged events in Islamic history, the tragedy of Karbala and the ultimate downfall of the Umayyad ruler Yazid. Now, our goal here today isn't to debate theology. Instead, we're going to impartially unpack exactly how this source material constructs its narrative of tyranny, ultimate sacrifice, and divine retribution. It is a fascinating look at how historical legacies are framed, so let's get right into it. This sermon actually kicks off with a brilliant philosophical hook. The speaker asks us to consider a really sharp distinction between just being famous and actually being respected. Because fame, as the speaker notes, absolutely does not equal honor. To back this up, they point to figures like Pharaoh, Karun, and even Satan himself. These are names with undeniable historical fame, right? Literally everyone knows who they are. But they are universally reviled. So the speaker contrasts this idea of notorious fame with the enduring respect that people hold for the righteous. This completely sets the stage for the specific historical figure the sermon is about to dissect. Section 1. The meaning of infamy. So, what does infamy actually mean in this context? Well, the sermon defines it as being incredibly well known, but entirely for your terrible qualities or deeds. And the speaker presents Yazid as the ultimate historical poster child for this very concept. They argue that while Yazid is undeniably famous, his legacy is permanently chained to his degradation and dishonor. The entire explainer we're doing today uses Yazid as a historical case study of someone who secured immense power, but is remembered purely for his disgraceful actions. Section 2. A tyrannical character. The speaker really doesn't hold back here. They outline some incredibly specific transgressions attributed to Yazid's reign, describing him as a fundamentally corrupt and oppressive individual. According to the source, Yazid actually engaged in and normalized forbidden, incestuous marriages. He's also accused of aggressively spreading usury or interest throughout the society. But perhaps most shockingly for the audience, the sermon asserts that he blatantly violated the sanctity of Islam's two holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. The source material paints a picture of a ruler who unleashed such severe cruelty that, as the speaker puts it, humanity still shudders at the very thought of it. So that brings up a really crucial question. When a ruler engages in what the source describes as completely unprecedented tyranny, tearing apart the moral fabric of society, what happens next? How do the righteous figures of that time respond to this level of blatant physical and ideological violence? This pivots us right toward the monumental conflict that defines this whole narrative. Section 3. Imam Hussein's ultimate sacrifice. This brilliantly illustrates the core dilemma at play. The source material explains that Imam Hussein refusing to pledge allegiance to Yazid wasn't just some personal stubbornness. It was a matter of massive historical significance. Think about it. If Imam Hussein had just caved in and accepted Yazid's rule for the sake of temporary safety, the sermon argues that the line between truth and falsehood would have been permanently blurred for every generation to come. By standing absolutely firm for the truth, despite the obvious terrifying danger, he created an undeniable contrast between righteous leadership and tyranny. And according to the speaker, this is exactly why Imam Hussein sacrificed his entire family and his closest, most devoted companions at Karbala. It literally wasn't a battle fought for a throne, it was the ultimate demonstration of principle. The sermon states that this immense sacrifice delivered a timeless message. Followers of truth must never bow to falsehood, no matter how heavily armed or powerful that falsehood appears to be. The speaker enthusiastically notes that this one stand preserved the courage of righteous people, lighting a fire of bravery that will keep burning until the day of judgment. Section 4. The heir rejects the throne. Now, the source details this highly dramatic moment near the end of Yazid's life. As he lay dying, he calls his eldest son, Muawiyah bin Yazid, right to his bedside to hand over the keys to the empire. But as the sermon tells it, before Yazid could even finish, his son outright rejects the whole thing with absolute contempt. He literally tells his father, "I cannot accept a throne stained with the blood of the prophet's family. May God deprive me of this cursed inheritance." The son completely disowns the empire because he saw its foundations as being built on the blood of the prophet's grandson. And the speaker notes that hearing this complete rejection from his own flesh and blood caused Yazid to thrash about in extreme agony. Section 5. An agonizing demise. Fair warning, the details provided in the source here are incredibly visceral. The sermon describes divine retribution where Yazid was struck by this severe, agonizing intestinal disease. The claim is that his internal organs essentially rotted away and became infested with maggots. The pain was apparently so intense that the speaker describes him squealing and screaming like a pig. On top of that, he suffered a terrifying torment regarding water. He was desperately thirsty, but whenever a drop of water went down his throat, it felt like he was swallowing sharp needles. The sermon states he was just thrashing around like a fish out of water, finding zero relief whether he drank or didn't. And the physical degradation actually didn't end when he took his final breath. The narrative claims that after Yazid finally succumbed to this agonizing death, his body emitted a stench so incredibly foul, so overpowering, that people couldn't even physically approach the corpse. It's as if the physical decay perfectly mirrored the spiritual decay the speaker had been outlining all along. Section 6. The historical aftermath. This sequence of events presented in the sermon beautifully maps out the swift and total arc of his downfall. First, you have the onset of that debilitating intestinal disease. Second, the ultimate familial defeat, when his own son violently rejects the blood-stained throne. Third, his torturous, humiliating death. And finally, the historical epilogue cited by the speaker. Years later, during the Abbasid era, Yazid's grave was dug up. And what did they find? According to the historical texts referenced, all that remained were burnt, blackened bones. It represents a total erasure of his worldly power, leaving only a lasting symbol of divine wrath. To summarize this massive historical and ideological clash, the speaker cites this incredibly famous and heavy-hitting poetic couplet. Qatl-e Hussein asal mein marge Yazid hai. Islam zinda hota hai har Karbala ke baad. Which basically translates to, the assassination of Hussein is in reality the death of Yazid. Islam is revived after every Karbala. It is such a profound conclusion to their narrative. It makes the case that, sure, Yazid might have won the physical battle on that specific day, but he absolutely lost the war of history. Imam Hussein's physical death was the very mechanism that destroyed Yazid's legacy forever. So what does this all mean for us? It brings us to a final question that echoes way beyond 7th century Arabia. Does the relentless pursuit of worldly power ever truly extinguish the light of moral integrity? Well, the narrative we've explored today from Dawat-e-Islami gives us a hard no. It presents a really stark historical thesis that tyranny, no matter how heavily armed or politically dominant, inevitably rots from the inside out. Meanwhile, true moral integrity, even when it demands the ultimate sacrifice, cements a legacy of respect that literally lasts until the end of time. It's an absolutely fascinating look at how we measure the true victors of history. Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis. Keep asking questions, keep examining the sources, and I will catch you on the next one.